Light and dark, the real, the beautiful, deep in the soul, what a spectacle. Cherish the day that will
Xiaomi.
I've been excited about Xiaomi's new 12s Ultra because it has a massive camera module. I mean, look at this thing. Almost half the back of the phone is this massive camera module. The first 20 pages of Xiaomi's website for this thing are all camera stuff before it talks about anything else. They even have this video morphing from a camera to this phone on their site. And it has the world's largest smartphone camera sensor inside. Can you imagine being the person at a party where everyone's got their phones? They're like, hey, we want to take a group picture. Does anybody have a good smartphone camera? And you, yeah, I got it. I guess I'm trying to say that this phone better has an excellent camera. So there's been quite a bit of hype around this new Xiaomi 12s Ultra recently, so I had to give it a shot. The headline about this product is that it's rocking the world's giant smartphone camera with a 1-inch sensor, but there are a couple of things about that. 1-inch sensors aren't 1 inch, and 2, this is not the first smartphone with a 1-inch sensor. There have been a couple before this, but this is the first one with Sony's new IMX989 sensor, the first one built for a smartphone camera instead of repurposing to go into a smartphone. So Xiaomi technically beats Samsung to the punch. We know they're working on their ISO camera that will probably be a 1-inch sensor coming to the Galaxy S23 Ultra sometime next year. So Xiaomi beat them to the punch. That's the point of this phone. To one-up Samsung's Ultra Note, link is to the ultra-wide edition in as many ways as possible and slap the same name on it. So they can do it better. That's the statement they're making. When I got my hands on this phone, that's what I wanted to find out. Does it beat the king of the hill, Galaxy S22 Ultra, at its own game? And most importantly, is it worth having the world's giant smartphone camera? By the way, it's this one, not this one in the middle. Note, shows image of Ultra Comprehensive Edition, that's the ultra-wide, and it's not this bottom one here. Note, shows image of Telephoto Edition, that's the 5x telephoto. That one in Note, shows image of Standard Edition. That one is the world's largest smartphone sensor. So I've taken quite a few photos and videos over the past few days testing this phone's camera in both standard and crazy, and more extreme conditions at its limits. And it turns out, yeah, this camera is competent and is good very often. So the 50-megapixel primary camera takes excellent detail and sharpness from binning down to 12.5 megapixels. It has a knack for reeling in exposure even in harsh conditions, especially when taking photos in the sun, and with a high dynamic range. But I noticed two amazing things that made good photos good on this phone. And that's the shutter speed, and the autofocus is consistently fast. The substantial sensor lets in so much light, so it's great if we're taking pictures of moving objects like kids and vehicles, pets sprinting around a studio with endless energy, all that stuff. It freezes the action and nails focus very reliably, which is super confidence-inspiring in a camera. The 12S also does surprisingly well in low light, which shouldn't be a surprise, given the light-gathering ability of a huge sensor. So I did a blind side-by-side against the phone it's trying to one-up so bad, the Galaxy S22 Ultra, on Twitter. I should have done a poll instead of asking you guys, but based on the replies, you all preferred the 12's shot despite it being more saturated, mainly because it reeled in the bloom from the street light better than its competitor, thanks to better lens coatings and such. And it still kept all the details on the rest of the exposure, and had very low noise. You might have noticed the Leica branding in the corner on the back of the phone. They did have some help from Leica on the optics and coating over the glass to reduce things like fringing and chromatic aberration. And it works great, both with color science and low light performance. So when you first fire up the phone asks you if you want to shoot with the Leica authentic look or the Leica vibrant look. You can think of them as the same as your iPhone's photographic styles. The authentic look is a little less saturated, while the vibrant kicks out a more instantly shareable, traditional look. But neither of them is particularly significant to my eye. There are plants on the roof. It's windy up there. I took a picture of the plants, but they're moving quickly in and out of the frame, just like that. The photo I get back is this tack-sharp shot with an incredibly shallow depth of field and enormous dynamic range. I couldn't believe it. Just seeing how fast the stuff was moving around in and out of the frame. Autofocus even worked, locking on and keeping it in focus, doing it again and again over and over again. Then another time, I took a photo of just my cleats on the ground before I got up. So this was not a particularly difficult shooting condition. It's not much moving. It's just me, standing still. But optically, it might be the most impressive photo I have ever seen from a smartphone camera. Keep in mind that there is no portrait mode here. This is a typical depth of field. My cleats are tack sharp and there's an evident, shallow depth of field, and you can see the slight roll off of the blur getting stronger and stronger the further you go back in the frame, and the exposure and contrast and color of the actual shot are also lovely. So it's just a random off-center snap of my feet, but Jesus, from a phone. I kind of love this photo. I am going to pixel peep, and I am going to go through those things. The massive sensor on the G7X Mark II makes for an excellent natural depth of field, which we know is incredible. It's terrific for those mid-range shots, like 2 to 4 feet away, but when you get too close, it starts to fringe, like any other smartphone with a huge sensor. So you can get close to a subject, and there's an absolute blur, but often part of the subject is in focus and then some aren't. And the blur is pretty ugly when this happens. Now they try to combat this, like many others do, by auto-switching to macro mode, which comes from the ultra-wide camera. Unfortunately, the ultra-wide camera has a dramatically different look and color. It just looks so different overall. And in my opinion, it looks worse. It solves the fringing problem, but yeah, it looks worse. And then, speaking of colors, the color science is dramatically inconsistent between the lenses. You can easily see that if you quickly switch between them, like going from 4.9x to 5.2x, there's a pretty big difference in colors. Similarly, exposure and contrast also change drastically with these two lenses. So I try the feature again where you can switch between all three lenses while zooming through video. Excellent that you can do that, right? I point the camera at a plane. And I start taking this video, but then something seems off because what I see in the viewfinder is that it tracks the plane and keeps it in the center of the viewfinder. So imagine my surprise when this clip comes out of the shot. It starts by zooming in on the plane, but then looks like I fall asleep while recording. Like it leaves the frame. So I was trying to figure this out. And so when it showed me that I was keeping the plane in the middle of the frame, it switched to the telephoto camera, at its maximum zoom, that adds up. I think they can fix this with software by adjusting where the zoom happens. But anyway, there is so much more I could tell you about this camera, from the optical lens emulation, a couple of old lenses to all the various modes and things. There's a supermoon mode, multi-video angle mode, and a whole bunch of other stuff, but I feel the summary with this gigantic camera on this smartphone is that the hits hit. It's hit or miss, but the hits hit hard. It is a fascinating optical experience shooting with this phone. The rest of the phone, by the way, is very much ultra, such as, again, they're aiming directly at Samsung here. Snapdragon 8 Plus generation, one chip with 12 gigs of RAM, is now a few months ahead of Samsung making that leap. They say that the Mi 12's Ultra is an impressive phone. Users should not see this phone in real life if they live in the United States or North America. The phone goes for about $900, which won UPS Samsung's Ultra. Xiaomi said that they wanted to make an impressive phone. I think they were successful.